So the lighting's a bit weird. I'm sorry. I hope that does not bother you. If you read today's title, then you know I'm going to be ranking every Ood episode of Doctor Who. If you want to get straight into the rankings, please skip to this timestamp. But if you don't stick around to hear my rules and parameters, I would recommend sticking around for them because it gets a bit tricky, and I'll explain that more in the rules and parameters. But if not, skip ahead. Okay, hi everyone. I hope you are having a good weekend, wherever. It's been a while since I've made one of these videos, not because I didn't want to, but because these videos honestly are the ones that take me the longest to film and edit. So I am continuously prepping for these videos. I promise. I'm just taking 6 classes, so it makes it a bit trickier in my schedule to be able to film and edit these. But that's my information. That has nothing to do with y'all. If you guys were wondering as to why it was taking a little bit to film these videos, because I notice a lot of people like them. But yeah, let's just get straight into the rules and parameters. First of all, I of course went through and looked at what people were saying, what constituted an Ood episode, and I was able to find this really extensive list of what every episode in Ood showed up in Doctor Who. And when it came to deciding what was an Ood episode and what wasn't, it's sometimes the lines blended a little bit. One of the main reasons is because I feel like Oods are one of those Doctor Who aliens that they're not just strictly bad, they're not just strictly good. They can be good and they can be bad. And most of the time, as you'll see later, them being bad is not a direct cause because they want to be, but because that is the situation, sometimes they show up in scenarios where the episode doesn't necessarily center them. They just kind of play background. Like, let's say, for example, speaking from not a like you watching the TV show perspective, speaking from a production perspective of a TV show, in a TV show like Doctor Who where you want to show aliens, and Ood would be an easy alien to show because it is plausible for them to just show up in the background of somewhere. And that was the case with some of these episodes. I have some episodes where the Oods had nothing to do with the episode, but the Ood showed up on screen for about 5 seconds, and so they made it to that list. And there are a few episodes where like the Oods are in the episodes, but they're in the episodes for less than 20 minutes, and their only job is to give the doctor a simple message, and then the doctor goes on and does stuff. And I didn't want to include those as Ood episodes because those episodes do not center the Oods, and they do not have the Oods as consistent main characters throughout the episodes. Another example I will give is that towards I can't remember what season it is, but it's one of the 13th Doctor seasons. It is her last season. Towards the end, the Ood shows up in the episodes, but the Ood is not the main character in the episode. The Ood isn't one of the main characters, in my opinion. The Ood is there to kind of just like deliver messages to the Doctor and then not be there anymore. The Ood isn't a main character, it isn't a true essential part of the plot. And so I didn't want to include episodes like that because I felt like it wasn't true to what I would consider ranking every Ood episode, where the Oods are essential to the plot. They do move the story forward and they do play an important part in the story. So yeah, when I was using that to base what I considered an Ood episode and what I didn't consider an Ood episode, it kind of lowered how many episodes were Ood episodes. So this is going to be a short one. Well, not super short. I don't know how long this is actually going to be, but it's definitely going to be a bit shorter than my last one. Let's get into the recap and ranking. I should start by saying, of course, there are spoilers for every single one of these episodes in various different seasons of Doctor Who. So if you want to watch these episodes before I do my recap and ranking, all the episodes in order will be down in the description box below. Or if you've seen these episodes and you want a recap, I will be giving you a recap and a ranking. Feel free to put your ranking down in the comments. You can explain yourself or you don't have to explain yourself. I should also say, I always say this, I have notes on my leg, so if you see me looking down at any point, am looking at my notes to make sure that I get all these details correct. But the first Ood episode of Doctor Who is The Impossible Planet, and it is season 2, episode 8. So our episode starts with the Doctor, the 10th Doctor, and Rose showing up onto this space station, or at least that's what they're believing it is. They don't truly know where they have landed, and they're kind of in this circular type of control room. It's not necessarily a control room, but I'm trying to give you images to imagine here. And they come across an Ood. At this point, the doctor doesn't know what an Ood is, and Rose does not know what an Ood is. And so when they come across this Ood and this Ood is coming at them, they believe that the Ood has ill intent, but it turns out that the Ood was simply just offering them refreshments. Speaking of, not long after, the Doctor and Rose are found by the people inhabiting the space station, and they basically take them, and they're like, there's humans. That humans have showed up on the ship. This is kind of impossible. We don't understand what is happening here. So, of course, they take the Doctor and Rose to the actual control room where the captain is and where a majority of the crew is. And during this little back and forth, we get to learn that this space station is basically docked on a planet that is right in front of a black hole. It is called the Impossible Planet, as the episode says, because that's not supposed to be something that can plausibly happen. Anything near a black hole is supposed to be sucked in, but for some reason, this planet, this space station is safe because of reasons unknown. Of course, the Doctor is raving about this, but now I'm going to get to the names of each of the crew members and their roles, just so that we can have names to everybody. First one we have is Ida Scott, which I will be calling Ida. She is the science officer. Then we have Zachary Cross Flane, which I'll be calling Captain or Zach. Then we have Mr. Jefferson, who is head of security. Then we have Danny Bartok, which I'll be calling Danny. He is over the ethics committee. Then we have Toby Zed, who I'll just be calling Toby. He's the archaeologist. And then we have Scooty Manista, who I'll just be calling Scooty, and she is the trainee in maintenance. The planet is called Croptor, which is, in some whatever language, the translation is the bitter pill. When the Doctor starts questioning the crew, I believe at this point he is questioning Danny as to what the Oods are. They're kind of like standing in front of where they hold the Oods, and Danny's explains to the Doctor that the Oods are a servant race. They literally are bred to serve. This is not true, which we will find out in later episodes. But he's basically explained to him that they don't, that's what they're made for. He says they'll literally die if you do not tell them or give them directions or give them something to do or check on them. They'll let themselves go sick and die if you don't actively look and make sure they're not, sick or something. And as such, they treat them like that. They have them serving them drinks. They have them working in the cafeteria. They have them helping to clean. But as Danny is giving this kind of like introduction to the Oods to the Doctor, stuff starts going wrong with the ship. The Oods start acting weird. They have weird messages that come over their little comm that they hold. They're saying kind of like weird things. They'll say things in unison, and how they communicate with each other is over this telepathic frequency field, and they can tell that there's an issue because this frequency field, try saying that 5 times fast, this frequency field starts acting up and displaying elevated levels in Ood telepathic activity, which is not a good thing. But jumping to a different character, that being Toby, remember, the archaeologist, he's in his bedroom kind of looking at weird writing that is on this rock, and he gets possessed somehow, some way. He starts hearing like whispering coming from behind him, and the lettering that was on the rock is now appearing on his hands and then all over his body, and then his eyes turning red, and he gets possessed by what we will find out later, but just know he is now possessed. After his possession happens, we kind of jump to this scene where Scooty is kind of just going around the ship because the possession happened and the Ood weird thing was happening. It kind of, because she's a trainee maintenance, she goes to check on things, and she notices that the ship says that someone is outside the airlock, and she's like, okay, so who is it? The ship's like, I don't know, because the ship talks, by the way. And she's like, well, then tell me whose spacesuit is missing. And she's like, no one's spacesuit is missing. And then she looks out the window and sees Toby outside, no spacesuit. Remember, there's no air outside, so he's outside, covered in the lettering and red eyes just staring at her. And he starts to break the glass, and him breaking the glass sucks her out. We don't see this on camera, and he basically X's her. And when the airlock gets sealed again, Toby is back inside, and he's like, I don't know what happened. And Scooty is just missing. Everyone in the team, the doctor, Rose, check on him. Is like, what happened? What happened? Where'd you go? Why did the airlock break? What was happening? And he's clueless at this point. And no one still knows of Scooty being exed. After this happens, the whole gang moves into the dining hall and they're kind of just sitting there trying to figure out what happened. And then the doctor spots Scooty floating above the space station into the black hole. And obviously, this is where everyone finds out that she has passed. All this time, as this is actively happening, from the beginning, from before even the beginning of the episode, this team has been drilling down to the center of the planet to figure out what is happening. They are kind of scientists and they're trying to understand why this planet that shouldn't be here is here, why this planet has its own gravity source, all of this. So they've been drilling down to the center of the planet and the drill finally stops, meaning the drill has finally made it to the center of the planet. And at this point, the doctor volunteers to go with Ida to see what is in the center. Of course, Rose objects. She's like, let me go with you. And the doctor's like, no, I need you to stay up here and I'm going to go down with Ida. We'll see what's happening. And so the doctor and Ida gear up and go down in an elevator to the center of the planet. And now, at this point, to recap where everyone is, the doctor and Ida are in an elevator going down to the center of the planet. Rose, Toby, Danny, Mr. Jefferson, they are all manning the elevator, looking down at everything by Ood containment, where they were at the beginning of the episode. And then Captain Zach is in a separate little part of the space station, kind of looking at the controls from there. And so as they are watching the screens, watching the doctor and Ida descend, they notice the Oods start acting weird again. They start disobeying orders. They were all sitting kind of like in their spots staring at each other, and then they stand up and they turn to face everyone and see what they are doing. Well, not see what they're doing, but face them. But then we cut back to the doctor and Ida, and they have finally made it to the center of the planet, and it turns out that down there is not just like molten lava or anything. It is an entire civilization. It's like they've entered this big cavern and there's big statues, kind of like how you would imagine if you found some lost part of an Egyptian pyramid to look like. That's how it looks on the inside. And they come across this like big, really, really big hole that is being covered by something. If you remember, the Oods are kind of like standing up at this point and acting weird. The group, remember, with Toby, possessed Toby. Toby reveals that he is possessed of the entire group, and Mr. Jefferson threatens to pew pew him. And he's like, well, and then he takes all his like lettering, it escapes him, and he also starts to possess the Oods. And that is when their calm ball turns red, their eyes turn red, and Toby did this as a way to be like, well, you know, you can't take us all. And at this point, we know the Oods are possessed by the beast. What is the beast? We do not know that yet, but they basically say the beast is coming. It's what they're chanting, the weird things that they're saying. They also in unison say that they are the Legion of the beast right before they start attacking everyone. They end up Xing an unnamed crew member who was apparently on the ship who wasn't part of the main crew. Like, they don't have a name, they never have any lines. They simply are just there in the scene, get X'd for plot sake. And then the episode ends with the doctor and Ida, remember, down there in the middle of the center of the earth, the little hole that they were staring at, that starts opening up. The rest of the gang, again, that being Mr. Jefferson, Rose, and Danny at this point, and they still kind of are taking Toby with them, but I'll explain that a little bit later. They're running from the possessed Oods, and then Captain Zach is still in the control room, and he lets everyone know we are losing orbit and we are heading into the black hole. As for this episode, I do enjoy this episode. I think it's very interesting. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites. Again, I think it is because it's the beginning of a story, not the ending. Like, it's not beginning, middle, the end doesn't happen in this episode because it is a two-parter, which is kind of a trend with the Ood episodes. So I'm not going to base my ranking off of that. I will say that as for this is our first introduction to the Oods, it's pretty cool to see like the new Doctor Who alien getting introduced. I think after having watched this episode quite a few times, not just by making this Ood ranking, but just in general, because I've rewatched Doctor Who many times, I would say that I have to put this episode at 4. It's not my favorite Ood episode, but it definitely isn't a terrible one. So 4. The next episode is Satan's Pit, and it is season 2. I was about to say season 9. It is season 2, Episode 9. So, our gang, again, that being Toby, Mr. Jefferson, Rose, and Danny, have all escaped into this little hatch that they're kind of hiding out in from the Oods. The Oods are outside trying to get in, but as of right now, they are safe. But while this kind of like escape was happening, the Oods do end up Xing another one of the another different unnamed crew member. But again, they are all able to, the main four I just named were all able to make it to safety. If you're wondering why possessed Toby was allowed to stay with the group still has they're still apprehensive about bringing him with. Mr. Jefferson again was going to pew pew him, but Rose stops him because she's like, look, he's normal, he's not possessed anymore, he transferred all the possession to the Oods, so he's good now, which is, spoiler alert, it's not true at all. Switching back to Doctor and Ida, they at this point decide, let's not go into this hole, let's get back to safety. So they get back in the elevator to go back up. And what ends up happening is that something goes wrong and the elevator is chopped. Like the rope that would have taken the elevator up breaks and it cannot go up anymore. The reason this happens is because the beast basically switches off the power to the lift and at the same time uses the Oods, the possessed Oods, again to talk. And the Oods end up saying that this planet will be your grave, not only to the Doctor and Ida, but to basically everyone. And at the end of its like little in unison speech through the Oods, it kind of shows its face on this screen for like a quick flash second and then it goes away again. Captain Zack is still again by himself in the control room as this is all happening. He does end up getting the power back up to buy everyone some time, not necessarily the Doctor and Ida, but everyone who was escaping the Oods. But even though the Doctor and Ida originally were like, let's not explore this hole, because they are now trapped in the center of the planet, they're like, let's use the broken cable and actually explore the hole. And so the Doctor takes one for the team and he starts going down into the center of the hole, and Ida is basically acting as the rope person. If you've never been like rope climbing or anything, there's one person who always is at the end of the rope and there's someone who's like supporting it, and Ida's acting as the support. I don't know how to explain that better if you haven't done it before, but just know it always takes like, they always most of the time have two people manning everything if it's not like something like free climbing. Danny ends up coming up with this plan. He's like, hey, the Oods are able to talk to each other and talk and be possessed through their telepathic waves. That's how they communicate. So the way that we can end up defeating them is by cutting off that telepathic wave, but the only way we can do that is to go back to Ood habitation. So then that prompts Captain Zack and Mr. Jefferson to say, okay, well then what we can do is go through the air vents that are kind of under the base. You know, the Oods aren't there. The only issue being that these air vents do not have any air in them. They're not meant for humans to go through. And so what that causes Captain Zack to do is section by section, he has to oxygenate the different parts as the gang is through there. So let's say section A is where they're heading to. He has to oxygenate section A and then let them through, cut off the section before A, and then before they can get to section B, he has to oxygenate section B, let them through, and then cut it off, and then take the oxygen away from section A. But as Captain Zack is, you know, coming up with this plan and manning things from the control room, he is not safe. Oods are actively trying to get into his door too, but that doesn't stop him from working and trying to save his crew and the visitors, that being Rose and Doctor. So as the gang is climbing through the vents, remember they have to stop before they can get to the next section for it to be oxygenated. So they're just waiting there and they're having a good old conversation about things. And then they see the Oods. And when I say these Oods were like crawling for their lives, they were crawling for their lives very, very fast at these people. And so they're basically like yelling at Zack, hey, get the gate open, get the gate open, the Oods are coming, the Oods are coming. And Zack moves as fast as he can and he ends up getting the gate open. But as the gang is trying to get through, Mr. Jefferson stays back to fight off the Oods so that the rest of the gang can get through. And to let the rest of the gang through, at that point, this being Danny, Rose, and Toby, Zack has to take the oxygen out of the section that Mr. Jefferson was in. He wasn't able to make it to the next section with the rest of the gang before Zack had to close the door. And so as his final send off, Mr. Jefferson was like, please, Zack, I want to, you know, by losing air. I do not want to be mauled to my end by Oods. And so, as per his request, Zach takes all the air out and he passes by a fixation, as I believe what it's called. I'll correct myself if I'm wrong, instead of being mauled. And so, Zach opens the last section for them, and as the section gate opens, there are just Oods right there. So, what ends up happening is instead of going through the vents, the team goes up back into the space station, and Toby is the last one to be out. Rose and Danny are up there, and then Toby is like still in there, and he looks at the Ood and he goes like shh, and he is possessed again, meaning that he didn't give his possession away to the Oods. He's still possessed. And this part, I just want to mention it because it's like it's creepy and it's kind of cool. But as they get back into the space station, they are able to make it to Ood habitation, and they are able to emit the frequency to disengage, is what I will say to be nice, the Oods. So they are no longer possessed anymore. They're kind of incapacitated for the moment. Cutting back to the Doctor and Ida, at this point, they're not expecting anyone to save them. I should also mention that earlier on in either the last episode or this episode, the Doctor finds out that no longer has access to his TARDIS because one part of the space station collapsed, and this part of the space station that collapsed had the TARDIS. So he's thinking and under the impression that the TARDIS is gone and they're stranded. So this was another reason that he had decided to go down into the middle of the planet. But as the Doctor is being let down into the middle of the hole that they had just discovered, the cable stops, meaning they've ran out of cable. And so the Doctor and Ida are talking, and the Doctor is like, I don't know how much further I have to go, but I've already made it this far. I'm not coming back up. So he disconnects himself from the cable and falls however many feet down into the rest of the hole, leaving Ida to think that he has passed because she does not have communication with him any longer. She can't reach him. And at this point, Captain Zach, who does still have communication with Ida, tells her that they cannot reach her to save her. You know, the elevator was the only way they can do that, and Ida just has to accept that. She doesn't necessarily have a choice in the matter. So this prompts Captain Zach to, because the team has made it to him now in the control room, they all basically make a plan to leave the space station with everyone they have left. But of course, Rose is not for this idea. She does not want to leave the Doctor because, you know, that's her friend. And so she is fighting. She's saying, I'm staying, you guys go without me. And Captain Zach has the two men, that being Toby and Danny, hold her down, and he sedates her because he's like, I'm not losing any more people. I've already lost Scooty. I've at this point lost Ida. I've lost the Doctor. I've lost Mr. Jefferson. I'm not losing any more people just to lose any more people. So again, they sedate her and they all head to the evacuation ship. So cutting back to the Doctor, surprise, surprise, the Doctor is not gone. The Doctor is in the hole. He has survived, and his spacesuit is broken. Up in the part where Ida still is, there is no air. They are running out of an oxygen, and that was a problem for them. But upon impact on the fall, the Doctor's spacesuit broke, and he realized that he was able to breathe in this other part of the center of the planet. And he's kind of traveling through the hole. He's kind of seeing markings on the wall, and then he comes face to the face with the actual beast, who looks like the physical representation of Satan. Which throughout the episode, the beast has been saying, I go by many names. Some call me this, some call me that, some call me this, that. And basically, the Doctor also, at this point, you know, he's looking at the beast and he's like, you can't talk, but the person we were hearing up in the hole had a very, very intelligent voice. And so, you know, the Doctor's smart, and he basically works out that this thing right in front of him is just the beast. It is not the brain, it is just the physical body of the beast. And so the Doctor's like, where is the brain? Cut back to the evacuation ship. Rose is waking up and she's discovered that they have her on the ship and they are actively leaving the planet. Like, I don't know if they've necessarily taken off just yet, but they are like 2 seconds away from taking off, and she's leaving. And of course, she's throwing somewhat of a fit because she's like, at this point, she thinks she's leaving her friend. She's never going to see her friend again. And more on that later. Cutting back again to the Doctor. The Doctor is looking at the beast and basically working out that the beast has been trapped down here, and trapped for good reason. And he was like, this planet was basically built to be his prison, and these two vases that are in front of the Doctor are kind of like the keys to his prison. And the prison was built with a failsafe that if the beast were to get out, he would basically be sucked into the black hole. And so the Doctor has this dilemma to either destroy these two vases and, you know, X the beast, but then end up Xing Rose and the rest of the crew, or leave them and have the beast, who the Doctor has figured out the brain is elsewhere. So the doctors assume that the brain is leaving the planet. So he's like, I can either destroy these vases and the beast gets X'd, or I don't, I save my friend and he's able to escape. But of course, the doctor makes the rational decision to destroy the two vases, and this basically causes the planet to lose its own perpetual gravity that it had, which the ship had already taken off and was using this kind of like gravity field to travel away from the planet. But because the doctor destroyed the vases, that gravity field is gone, and so the instead of being able to get away from the planet like they originally were able to do, they are getting sucked into the black hole. So is the planet. And because this is happening and the beast is not being able to escape, possessed Toby, that being, now we have figured out that possessed Toby is in fact the brain of the beast that is getting away. Possessed Toby is back and is trying to be like, no, we're getting out of here. I do not want to stay on this planet anymore. I'm escaping. And so this prompts Rose to unlock Toby's seatbelt and shoot the window so that Toby gets sucked into the black hole, indefinitely Xing the beast's brain, which if the beast doesn't have a brain, the body is null and void as well. And I should say the ship is still heading to the black hole too. So it's like, if they thought they were all going to, pass anyways, you could have just left them there because that's where the ship was heading. But I digress. Down in the hole where everything is collapsing, the doctor, he doesn't think he's making it out, but he ends up stumbling upon the TARDIS. And of course, because he has the TARDIS, he has the free will to do anything he wants now. And so as the ship is heading into the black hole and Rose, Danny, and Captain Zack think it's the end, Captain Zack realizes that the ship is now heading away from the black hole. And that is when the doctor basically contacts the ship and is like, hey, I got someone here for you. Captain Zack, let's make a switch. I'll give you Ida, you give me Rose, and we can all head out of here. And I'll give you a tow away from this black hole and away from the planet, which is the planet is heading into the black hole, effectively Xing the beast's body as well. When the doctor and Rose get back together, the doctor he's happy. Everyone who was alive was able to make it out alive, but he was still kind of like, it was a bittersweet moment because he wasn't able to save the Oods, which because the beast was X'd, they were no longer possessed, so they were just Oods who were stuck on the ship. Oods, very docile, very cute. As he's traveling away, he is keeping that in mind, but as Captain Zack and his crew, which now only consist of Ida and Danny, as they are traveling away, Captain Zack starts reading off basically a in-ship report. I feel like there is a more technical name for it. I just can't think of it. But he ends up saying, I included this part because I thought it was genuine. As he's giving the obituary report, he names every single Ood off. Of course, we don't see him name every single Ood off, but as the episode is ending, as it is fading black, he is saying, for example, Ood number 1, passed with honor, which I think is something very significant because he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to acknowledge the Oods as beings or as essential crew, but he did when he was acknowledging who passed from the ship. And so I definitely like this episode a bit more than the first episode. I think, because it's being the second episode, this is where majority of the action kind of happened, which I will admit might be a trend with the next 2 episodes we're about to go over as well. But I think it's just kind of that's how it's set up. Thinking about my ranking, I would say I think I'm going to put this episode at a number 3 because I also just realized we only have 4 Ood episodes, which is another reason why I was being very, very specific in my rules and parameters as to breaking down what was what. But yeah, as of right now, this is going to go at a number 3 spot. Next episode is Planet of the Oods, and this is season 4, episode 3. We are still with the 10th Doctor, but the 10th Doctor no longer has Rose. At this point, he is with Donna. And so we open the episode with this businessman named Mr. Bartley kind of reviewing commercials. And the commercial he is reviewing is a commercial to sell Oods that we end up finding out later in the episode that's the entire purpose of this company. Thank you. And after he reviews the commercial, he's like, it's not giving, it's not what it's supposed to be. And so after watching the commercial, he asks the Ood to give him this file, and the Ood ends up giving him the wrong file, and he gets like mad about this. It's not the mad in like, oh, this is the wrong file. It's mad as in like unjustifiably mad about it, which he's not a good person. That's also established as well. And so as he's kind of like berating the Ood about this being the wrong file, the Ood ends up taking its comm ball and sticking it to his head and, electrocuting him to Then the Doctor and Donna do end up arrive on the planet. It is a very snowy planet that they end up arriving on, and this happens after a jump to different characters. But I want to say this before I get to that jump. So a little out of order, but still in sequence. The Doctor and Donna end up coming across this Ood in the snow who is, actively Xing as they come across it. And the Ood says the circle must be broken, which at this point the Doctor and Donna do not know what that means. So they're like, what is it? What does it mean? And then at that very moment, the Ood has red eyes and goes red and tries to attack them. And then it like eventually does pass. And so, of course, this definitely does pique the Doctor and Donna's interest. Also, at this part, the Doctor does mention the fact that this is his second time ever meeting the Oods or coming across the Oods, which to me, I mention that because I think it's cool. The Doctor knows so much stuff, but also at the same exact time, he doesn't know everything because in the episode before, that was his first time ever even seeing Oods as a species. So yeah, just cool. Now cutting back to a different characters that we're being introduced to, we are introduced to Mr. Halpin. He is the big time businessman that basically owns this company. The reason he is here is because the Oods keep getting this condition that they call red eye and, Xing people. And we are also introduced to Solana, who is her title is head of marketing and galactic liaison. And as she's like introducing herself, he's like, anyways, let's get straight to business. And Solana basically tells him that the Oods have X'd 3 people, and she also shows him the video of Mr. Bartland, who was the guy who was X'd in the beginning of the episode. And the actual I'm calling it a communication ball. It's in the episode, it was called a translator ball, so I will be referring to it as a translator ball from now on. And after this, they just basically head inside as Solana continues. Solana and I should say Dr. Ryder, who is the one working with the Oods as well, they all go into the building to further discuss what is happening with the Oods. But not long after, Solana comes back out and she is leading a tour group. These people are meant to be investors or people who are coming to buy Oods. And the Doctor and Donna basically join this tour group. And through the tour, we learn that the facility is called Double O, as in, Ood. Ood is spelled OOD. So play on words. And we also get this double scene. As Solana is saying all these amazing things about the facility, we are also actively cutting to soldiers chasing a feral Ood to pew pew it down. And so it's like I forget the word. It was like if I to your face was saying oh, I got it. It's like when that one saying, there is no war in Ba Sing Se. If you know, you know. I should say Solana is giving her speech in this storeroom, this showroom, and the Oods are basically like standing on these platforms to be kind of like looked at as possessions or as property, as things to be sold. Doesn't sit well with my soul. Of course, it doesn't sit well with Donna's or the Doctor's either. And they basically go snooping around to understand what is happening here and why the Oods are being treated like this. And I should say that the year that this is taking place is, how do you say this, 4126? Isn't that crazy? 4126. But cutting back to Mr. Halpin is now in one of the warehouses, I believe with Dr. Ryder, trying to figure out what is causing the red eye. And as this is also happening and Dr. Ryder is trying to explain this to Mr. Halpin is like, I need a drink. The person who gives him the drink is his personal Ood, and this Ood's name is Ood Sigma. And Ood Sigma gives Mr. Halpin a drink, and Mr. Halpin asks for a drink very very frequently when people look at him weirdly because it kind of does look like he's just drinking on the job. He's like, no, this is not alcohol. This is a hair tonic is basically what he's saying. It helps his hair grow back because he's under so much stress, so he thinks that's what is causing his hair to fall out. And in this warehouse, we do not see what it is, but Mr. Halpin is looking down on this thing and he's basically thinking this is what is causing the issue with the red eye for the Oods. And he ends the scene with calling the thing the Ood Daddy, the Ood's daddy. So moving on. What kind of also ends the scene is the fact that Solana calls Mr. Halpin and is like, I just looked up the Doctor and Donna. They go by different names there, but I'll just call them the Doctor and Donna. She ends up looking them up in the system and is like, they're not actually investors. They're not representatives for any like certain business, and they are also now missing. And so Mr. Halpin is like, okay, I want them found and I want them found quietly. But cutting to the Doctor and Donna, they end up sneaking into an Ood transportation warehouse where they find cargo ships just full of Oods standing there not doing anything. When the doctor opens the container and Donna looks at the Ood, she's like, the container is open. Why are you guys still just standing here? Why aren't you trying to escape? And the Ood basically tells her that they live to serve, and she's like, well, you can be free, the door is open. And there's like, we live to serve. And then they do end up getting found. An alarm goes off and the doctor and Donna end up getting separated. Donna ends up getting trapped in one of the shipment containers, and the doctor ends up getting chased by a big claw, like an actual claw that is being manned by one of the soldiers. Back in the cargo container that Donna is being trapped in, she's standing at the edge of the container, and all of a sudden, all the Oods end up getting red eye and start heading towards her. Luckily, Solana comes across the soldier that is trying to basically claw the doctor, and she stops him because she tells him that Mr. Halpin wants them back alive. And so at this point, the main soldier that was attacking the doctor, Solana and the other soldiers are kind of gathered together. They're still kind of holding the doctor as he is like a suspect. And then you can hear like Donna yelling on one of the shipment containers that they're passing. And so the doctor tells them to let her out, which they were going to do. They didn't necessarily listen to the doctor because he said that. And he didn't even say it like that. He was like, oh, you're gonna be mad if you keep her in there. Something kind of like that. And so as they open the shipment container for Donna to be let out, other Oods that have now been infected with red eye, which is basically the entire containment facility, which I should say this warehouse is full of shipment containers full of Oods, and they all start attacking, and the soldiers stand their post and start, pew pewing the doctor, Donna, and Solana. That kind of rhymed. They all escape the warehouse. And the doctor to Solana is like, you can come with us, you can help us figure out what is happening and help us understand. And Solana doesn't end up coming with them. She just kind of gives them directions to where Ood conversion is, because that's where they were looking for. Again, instead of going with them, she basically yells, they're over here. And the doctor and Donna run away as she just stands there. She also snitches on them and says, in her like calm that she has, that the doctor and Donna are heading toward Ood conversion. So of course that alerts Mr. Halpin, Dr. Ryder, and all these people as to where they are heading. But Dr. and Donna do make it to Ood conversion, and they basically find Oods in a cage holding something that they're guarding. It doesn't look like the translator ball that the other Oods have. And so after unlocking the cage and going in, the doctor goes down to the Oods level, and the Ood basically reveals to the doctor that in its hand it is holding a brain. And they realize that the Oods are not born with the translator ball. I'm not saying the doctor believed that in the first place, but every Ood at before this moment the doctor has come across has had a translator ball. But basically, the Oods have three brains. They have a secondary brain that is basically called a hindbrain, and this is the one that is responsible for memories and emotion. They have one in their head as well, and that one is responsible for something else. And basically, to get the Oods connected to their translator ball, they get lobotomized, and their brain that is responsible again for their memories and emotion is the one that's in their hand. That's the one that's removed and replaced with the translator ball, which is absolutely terrible and absolutely crazy to think to do. And I'll come back more to it later as to what the doctor says about this, especially to Mr. Halpin. But yeah, I'll move forward. But as the doctor and Donna are finding this out, they get, obviously because Solana told on them, they get caught by Mr. Halpin. And as they're getting arrested by Mr. Halpin, they're scolding him for basically lobotomizing the Oods when there was no reason to. And Mr. Halpin is like, well, they didn't fight back. Donna says they're born with their brains in their hands. How could they fight back? I feel like the earth equivalent to we have to Oods are basically like manatees. So could you imagine, I mean, they're in water, so it's kind of hard, but yeah, like, could you imagine taking a manatee, removing something from it just so it could be, just so you can use it? Anyways, I just hope that makes sense. We cut back to the showroom where all the investors and representatives for different companies are at, and Solana is back in the showroom, and the Oods in there switch, and they now are infected with red eye, and they start going around and Xing people. I counted about 5 people who got X'd. There might have been more, but I only counted about 5. Solana does end up escaping, but not for long, because as she's outside, she ends up getting X'd by an Ood on the outside of the building, because if you remember, all the Oods that were in Ood containment escaped and are just out and about now. So now the soldiers are not only fighting them inside the warehouse, they're fighting them outside the warehouse. And the one of the ones that made it outside the warehouse is the one that ex Solana. As they all get outside, that being the Dr. Donna, Mr. Halpin, Ood Sigma, and Dr. Ryder, as they are leaving the Ood conversion facility, this is when they see that the Oods are running amok and the soldiers are Xing them. And so Mr. Halpin leaves the Doctor and Donna to be X'd by the red eye Oods that are just running around. He and Mr. Ryder kind of like run off, and Mr. Halpin frees Ood Sigma, and he's like, be with your people, be free to do whatever you want. And as a red-eyed Ood is about to X Doctor and Donna, they say Dr. Donna friends, which is something they said back to the Oods in Ood conversion, and that message rings through, and the Oods that were in Ood conversion stop the red-eye Oods from Xing the Doctor and Donna. How they do this is that, again, if you remember from the last episode, the Oods are connected telepathically, and normally when the Oods do not have the translator ball, they sing to each other, and so they basically sing at the Ood telepathically to stop it from Xing Doctor and Donna. To escape, Mr. Halpin and Dr. Ryder go to the warehouse 15 again, and Mr. Halpin goes here because he doesn't know how to stop the red-eyed Ood situation. The only thing he can come up with is to get rid of what he calls the third element, which also the same thing that he called the Ood's daddy going on. So he goes to warehouse 15 with the intent to destroy the third element. And the Doctor and Donna, of course, rush in after him. And this is when we finally see what the third element is, which I kind of gave it away if you caught on to that when I mentioned how many brains the Oods have. But the third element ends up being another Ood brain. And the Oods basically have, like I said, they have 3 brains. They have a forebrain, which is in their head. They have a hindbrain, which is the one in their hand, and then they have a collective brain, which is a shared mind that they all share. And the third brain in the episode is basically really, 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 really big, and it is being trapped inside a circle, oh my gosh, of electrical wires, and it's basically stopping the Oods from being able to communicate to each other properly. And Ood Sigma also runs in with the Doctor and Donna. I should also say that when Mr. Halpin is looking at the third element, is what I'll call it, he's kind of like mad, and this is when Dr. Ryder reveals that he is the reason the Oods are able to communicate now, because Mr. Halpin's company has been he's inherited it. His father and his grandfather owned it as well, and he's like, this hasn't happened in the either hundreds or 100 of years that this company has existed. And this is when Dr. Ryder admits that he's the reason that this is happening in the first place. And the electrical field is basically considered like a dampener. He turned it down to its lowest level, so now they're able to sing to each other. And the minute that Mr. Halpin finds this out, and Dr. Ryder is like, I did this, and Mr. Halpin's like, okay, cool, and then he pushes him into the third element, the collective brain, effectively Xing Dr. Ryder. And then he turns his attention to the Doctor and Donna because he plans on Xing them as well, and again, destroying the collective brain to start over again. And when I say start over again, I mean he said he plans on starting a new farm with new Oods who are not infected with red eye. But as he's pointing his pew pew at the Doctor and Donna, Ood Sigma steps in front of him and is like, sir, you need to drink your drink. And Mr. Halpin is like, no, I do not. Why? What? And Ood Sigma is still like, sir, you need to drink your drink. And then the Doctor asks Ood Sigma what's in the drink. Ood Sigma says, and I quote, Ood graft suspended in a biological compound, which the Doctor has an aha moment and he kind of starts giggling to himself. And we find out that Ood Sigma has basically been feeding Ood matter. I don't like that. And what this Ood matter effectively does is turns Mr. Halpin into a Ood. And so he starts coughing, and he ends up coughing up a brain, and then he like pulls at his skin, and his skin all comes off, and he turns into an Ood. And now that he's completely an Ood, remember Oods are the earth equivalent to manatees, Ood Sigma's like, I got him, we'll take care of him, he's one of us now. If that is not the most horrifying yet peaceful retaliation, I don't know what is. But once Ood Sigma takes the now Ood Mr. Halpin out, the Doctor turns off the electrical field and now allows the Oods to sing freely, to be free, to connect in the brain. And at the end of the episode, the Doctor and Donna return to the TARDIS, and Ood Sigma, thanks them. He's like, you can stay. you can stay on the planet with us if you like. There's always room. We're gonna be building here." The doctor's like, "No, we have to go. Sorry." And they leave. Now, I very much enjoy this episode of Doctor Who. I think it effectively does do a good job at explaining what the Oods are. It gives us a lot more information about what they are and what they're capable of and how they operate. Like, for example, if someone asked me, where do I figure out what Oods are, and they would rather watch a TV show than look it up in an article or something, I would point them to this episode because it gives them a lot of information. Plus, it's very entertaining. So I think as of right now, I'm gonna put this episode in the number one spot. Okay, so moving on, I think I should do some honorable mentions because there technically are two more Ood appearance episodes in the the fourth season of Doctor Who. But again, if you missed my rules and parameters, I didn't include these episodes because, for example, there is an Ood that appears in the waters of Mars, which is season 4, episode 16. But when I watched the episode, I literally counted the Ood was in the episode for 6 seconds. Another honorable mention is The End of Time, which is season 4, episode 18. This is the episode that the Doctor regenerates, and the Ood shows up to give the Doctor a message and then gone. The Doctor visits the Ood planet, the one that they were on in the last episode, and the Oods have now established their own society. They're back together. They have their own president and everything like that. And they give the Doctor a message, and the Doctor is not with the Oods anymore. So I did not include these episodes in my ranking, but I did want to still mention them because they do show up. But getting into our last Ood episode of Doctor Who is The Doctor's Wife, and this is season 6, episode 4. So we begin this episode on a planet. We are introduced to someone called Aunt, someone called Uncle, a woman named Idris, and an Ood called Nephew. Idris is asking, "Is this gonna hurt? Is everything gonna be okay?" And Aunt and Uncle are very lackluster and like, "Yeah, no, it's actually gonna hurt a lot, but it's necessary." And so Nephew, which is the Ood, ends up holding Idris still as the ritual starts. Then we cut to Amy and Rory and the Doctor in the TARDIS in the middle of space, and the Doctor gets a knock on the door, and of course he's confused because they're in the middle of space. And as he opens the door, an illuminated cube that kind of looks like the Tesseract, not the same size as Tesseract, is literally about like that big. It flies into the TARDIS, and the Doctor immediately recognizes it as a Time Lord emergency message. And on the cube is like this snake. It's a picture of the snake eating itself. And the Doctor reads the message, which ends up leading them to the end of the universe, actually outside the universe, to an unknown planet. The minute the Doctor lands TARDIS on the planet, the TARDIS goes completely dead. It like drains and turns off. The Doctor tries to turn it back on. It's gone. The TARDIS is no power anymore. And as soon as that happens, if you remember the woman Idris, she was kind of like laying still like on the floor, and she like comes back to life. And as you see her come back to life, like yellow energy kind of like sucks into her. And this should be a clue as to what happened, but I will obviously continue if you don't know. But because the TARDIS is drained, the Doctor, Amy, and Rory, obviously, they get out and they start to explore. And Idris immediately runs up to the Doctor, and she's kind of like acting sporadic and stuff. And she's like, "Hello, goodbye," and like also saying things that happen in the future. She's like, "You're like a child trying to build a motorbike in his living room," like saying things that don't make sense in sequence, but make sense later on. She also ends up calling the Doctor her thief. That's how she refers to them. She's like, "My thief, my thief." And Auntie and Uncle are basically like, don't mind her. She's a very, very crazy lady. And she's like, "No, I'm not a crazy lady. He's my thief." And the Doctor's like, and then she ends up biting the Doctor, and then she kind of like powers herself down, like she's like, "Oh, I think I'll take a nap now," and then just drops to the floor. And Nephew takes her and puts her in a cage. Well, Nephew offers to put her in a cage, I should say that, because once the Doctor notices Nephew and Ood on the planet, he kind of gets excited. He's like, "Oh, an Ood!" But the Doctor notices that Nephew's translator ball is broken, and so what the Doctor does is like, "May I fix it?" And so he fixes the Oods translator ball, and the minute that he fixes it, he hears all these voices kind of like yelling for help. And I think he picked up on this. I also picked up on this. Like, some of them were saying, "Submergently, help me. I come from Gallifrey," all these different things. And the Doctor knows that the sound that the Ood translator ball is picking up is not directly coming from the Ood. The Ood is not actively saying these things. So the doctor is like, it is picking up some type of communication. I want you to show me where it is. And he's saying this to aunt and uncle. Well, auntie and uncle. And auntie and uncle basically say there isn't really anyone else here. It's just me, nephew, and uncle and house. And the doctor's like, whose house? And so auntie and uncle take the doctor to meet house. And Amy, before they head in to see who house is, asks the doctor who were all those voices. And this is when the doctor does, in fact, tell them that those were the voices of Time Lords. Nephew goes to guard Idris's cage, and then auntie, uncle go and show the doctor, Amy, and Rory who house is. And basically, auntie just kind of gives this presentation. She's like, you're standing on him, you're breathing in his air, you are, you feed off of him. And the doctor basically explains to Amy and Rory that House is a sentient asteroid. And at this moment, this is when House talks through auntie and uncle in unison, the same thing that, if you remember, happened in the first Ood episode. And House basically says welcome, and House has like a very different voice than auntie and uncle. I'd recommend you go watch the episode if you haven't seen it. But he's like, hello, welcome to my planet. We've always loved having Time Lords as visitors. I repair auntie and uncle when they break, I feed them, all of this. And when House mentions the fact that he loves having Time Lords as visitors, the doctor makes a comment and is like, well, I'm the last one, so that's not gonna happen anymore. And as he's saying this comment, he like kind of looks and is examining auntie and uncle, and he notices that auntie's arm is slightly bigger than it should be, especially for a lady her size. But cutting back to Idris is in her cage being guarded by nephew, and she is again rambling, saying all these things that for the present moment doesn't make sense, but in the grand scheme of things does. And I know I'm not being very specific, but I will definitely explain later, I promise. But after this kind of like display from the house, the doctor wants to look around some more and look for where these Time Lord voices are coming from. And so he basically is like to Amy, dang it, I forgot my sonic screwdriver in the TARDIS. Can you go and get it? And so Amy's like, no, I want to stay with you. And he's like, well, I need my sonic screwdriver. And so she goes and gets his sonic screwdriver. And Amy tells Rory to stay with the doctor. But then the doctor tells Rory to go stay with Amy. So Amy and Rory go head back to the TARDIS. And of course, this was just a ploy to get Amy and Rory back into the TARDIS. The doctor, in fact, has his sonic screwdriver and he locks them in the TARDIS. And so he goes exploring around by himself and he ends up coming across this cabinet full of those emergency Time Lord cube balls. And at this point, remember I was saying Idris was having random rambles. One of the rambles that she said, she was like, the little boxes will make you angry. And the doctor, again, at this point has discovered the little boxes and realizes that these emergency boxes were distress signals from long past Time Lords who were lured to House, who were lured to the planet. And of course, this would make me angry as well, but it makes him angry. Auntie and uncle come up behind him and he's like, how many Time Lords have you lured here by using these boxes? And they're kind of like smug about it. And he also points out the fact that auntie and uncle are an amalgamation of different body parts from different Time Lords. If you remember, I mentioned on the cube box that originally knocked on the doctor's door, it had a snake eating itself on it. And the doctor, he said he knew a Time Lord who got this snake tattoo in every regeneration because they didn't feel like themselves unless they had the snake tattoo. And so when he is confronting auntie and uncle and he lifts up that arm that he noticed was out of place earlier in the episode, he notices that snake tattoo. Again, he points out the fact to auntie and uncle that these body parts aren't even yours. They are the body parts stolen from different Time Lords that have come here over time. And he makes a point that, like, I highly doubt that any of the original you is left, which is messed up. At this point, the doctor goes and questions Idris. I love the conversation these two have together because the doctor, she's saying, you're my thief. And the doctor is still not understanding what she's saying. And she says, well, I go. And then she makes the TARDIS sound. And he's like, you know, you do not. And she kind of like proves it to him. And he unlocks the cage. When the TARDIS is in the human body, I will call her Idris just to make it easy because we are going to be talking about the TARDIS, the physical box. So just know when I'm talking about the consciousness of the TARDIS, I'm going to say Idris. And when I'm talking about the box, I'll say TARDIS, just so we both don't get confused. So basically, the Doctor is trying to work out as to why House has put the TARDIS's consciousness into Idris. And he works it out that House feeds off Rift energy, and the TARDIS is full of it, but trying to feed on the TARDIS in general would kill House unless the House deletes the TARDIS's matrix first. So that's what the House does by putting the TARDIS into Idris's body. I hope that makes sense. That's basically how it's explained. And after he works this out, he realizes, oh, the Doctor is trying to feed on the TARDIS, and I literally just locked Amy and Rory in there. So he goes over to the TARDIS and runs after the TARDIS. But as he's like trying to bang on the door and trying to get back into the TARDIS evaporates and flies away with Amy and Rory inside. The Doctor runs back in to find Auntie and Uncle to figure out what is going on, and Auntie and Uncle basically tell him they're going to pass away. They're gonna go take a very extended long nap. And the Doctor's like, what are you talking about? I need to get the TARDIS back. Why are you guys trying to take a long nap? They both basically explained, but I think Uncle explains to most of it. And he said, well, you told House that there's no more TARDISes coming. There's no more Time Lords coming because you're the last one. So House is leaving us. And so Auntie and Uncle effectively just literally flop over and take their long nap. And so at this point, the Doctor realizes that not only is he stranded, but that the matrix of the TARDIS is a lot and is not meant for a human body. So Idris is, actively Xing within like the next 30 minutes. And so the Doctor, because he's on this planet, he realizes that he's in a TARDIS graveyard, basically. This entire planet is just full of scraps from old TARDISes because of the Time Lords that came here before left their TARDISes. So him and Idris devised this plan to create a TARDIS that they can fly in space to go after the Doctor's TARDIS to retrieve Amy and Rory and get Idris, the TARDIS's matrix, back into the blue box, the TARDIS. And while this is happening, we get cuts to Amy and Rory running around inside the TARDIS because House is basically playing with them. As he's taken over the blue box, the TARDIS, he is like, I will just, X you both. And Rory's like, well, why don't you have fun with us first instead of Xing us right away? And so that's what House does. And he basically tricks them and does things that takes air away, plays with their minds. I also wanted to say, because I don't feel like I included this in detail enough, he sends Nephew after them. Now, how Nephew ended up inside of House, I don't know, but Nephew is also actively coming after them, and House is still controlling Nephew the same way he was controlling Auntie and Uncle. And then cutting back to the Doctor and Idris, they're basically fighting like an old married couple. It's very adorable. At one point, Idris says to the Doctor, I wanted to see the universe, so I stole a Time Lord and I ran away. Which, if you don't know, that like mirrors what the Doctor always says. And he's like, I stole a TARDIS because I want to see the universe and I wanted to run away. And also they're kind of like having this deeper conversation. The Doctor is like, you never take me to where I want to go. And at the end of the argument, Idris is like, no, but I always take you to where you're needed. And then the Doctor is like, dang, you're right. And then he's like, well, what if we could always talk like this? And then Idris is like, that's not how it was built. And I won't get into their entire conversation, but it's adorable. They do eventually build the inner workings of a TARDIS enough for them to be able to fly in it. And the Doctor's like, how are we going to get this to work? And Idris is like, because of me. And she literally like puts her fingers to her lips and then kisses them and puts it onto the control panel. And the TARDIS basically, this is so I'm not confused. I hope you're not confused. But she kisses the control panel of the TARDIS they just built, and so they are able to effectively fly into space. And so now that they have taken off, they are heading after the blue box, the TARDIS. And as they're flying, Idris is telepathically communicating with Rory because they can't land. They can't land anywhere. They can't get access to the TARDIS without the help of Rory inside the TARDIS. And so it just gives Rory the directions to head into an older control room, not the newer one that the 11th Doctor actively uses, but a different one, which ends up being the 10th Doctor's control room. And as Amy and Rory are in the 10th Doctor's control room, House effectively sends Nephew to X Amy and Rory instead of taking out the control room. And as this is happening, the Doctor and Idris land in the control room. And after they are reunited, Amy's like, where is Nephew? And the Doctor's like, well, was he standing where we landed? And Amy's like, yes. And he's like, well, he's in the air now. So Nephew has been X'd. But how the Doctor explains it is he doesn't say that. He basically says he was redistributed. His atoms were redistributed into the atmosphere. And then the Doctor also makes a comment saying, another Ood I failed to save, which calling back to the first episode in the episodes that I've talked about where he made a comment as he was sad about how he couldn't save the Oods on the impossible planet. And even though they've made it back into the control room, House is still in control of the blue box of the TARDIS, and the Doctor gives him directions to be able to delete the 10th Doctor's control room. And he thinks by doing this, because, Idris, the Doctor, Amy, and Rory are in this room, he will X them. But the Doctor has had a failsafe installed in the TARDIS that if you delete control rooms like that, or rooms with people in it, people are automatically redirected to the main control room, which is where they end up when House deletes the control room. And not shortly after, as the TARDIS's matrix that is in Idris has used up all its available time inside of Idris, and it effectively X's inside of Idris, it releases its matrix back into the blue box that is its home. I hope that makes sense. I'm sorry. I'm trying my best here. Since the TARDIS's matrix has been released back into its home, it goes after House and effectively X's House and gains back control over its body. But before she completely settles into her home, she uses kind of like a projection, I would say, of Idris's body and form to talk to the Doctor one last time before she can't anymore, because as I mentioned earlier, because of the type of TARDIS she is, she can't just directly talk to the Doctor. And the exchange they have is very sad, very cute. She's like, I wanted to say hi, nice to meet you, Doctor. And I just would recommend going to watch the scene. But yeah, she is effectively back in her body in her house. And the episode basically ends with the Doctor, Amy, and Rory flying off to head somewhere else. And I lost my pencil. I guess I don't need it. I would definitely say this is one of my favorite episodes. I still am a bit iffy for calling it an Ood episode, since Nephew isn't completely in the episode, but he is a part of the main cast and does play a role in the episode, which is why I included it. But this is going to go in the number 2 spot. And now I'm going to tell you my list. This is the first time this has happened, but I'm satisfied with how my list looks now. I'm not going to make any changes to it. Normally I do have some changes, but I feel like this was more of a shorter video, a more relaxed recap and ranking. It might not be short to you guys, but after editing this one, anything is short. So yeah, I'm going to go over my list, starting from number 1 being my most favorite to my least favorite out of all these episodes. Of course, I love these episodes, so when I say least favorite, just know it's not like I would never watch this episode again. I actually restarted watching Doctor Who like a few days ago, so I'm going to end up hitting all these episodes and watching them over again. So when I say least favorite, don't take that like heavily. But starting from number 1 and going down to number 4, at the number 1 spot we have Planet of the Oods. At the number 2 spot we have The Doctor's Wife. At the number 3 spot we have Satan's Pit. And at the number 4 spot we have The Impossible Planets. So that is my list. I'd be curious to know your list down in the comment section. You can explain yourself if you put it down there, or don't explain yourself. But I hope you like this video. Liked if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more of me. I post every Wednesday. I hope you have a good weekend, weekday, weeknight, and bye.